inherit eternity. These bodies are not meant to last eternally, but He's going to give us a new one. That's a promise from Him, and God cannot lie. Are we looking forward to that promise? Are we looking forward to dwelling with Jesus and the Father for eternity, with each other for eternity? Absolutely. So those are promises from Him. Ahaz, you want a sign, the Messiah is still coming from Judah. The sign is He's going to be born of a virgin. There's your sign. To Ahaz, that would mean... Didn't even think about saying that. There's your sign. To Ahaz, that meant Judah's going to last. Yes, they were carried off into Babylonian captivity later on. This was somewhere around 700 BC, and you get down into the 500 BCs. Nebuchadnezzar comes, he overthrows and he carries them off. But you know what? The people do turn back to God. There are those that continue to call upon God, like Daniel. There are those who are willing to walk into a fiery furnace for God. And because of the faithfulness of those people, there are those that once again, 70 years after that, after they're carried off into Babylonian captivity, call upon God and say, we trust in you. And He took them back to the land, just like He'd promised them. He took them back. He established it again. God's promises are always true. Judah was preserved, and it was preserved even for the coming of a child. That the phrase, unto us a child is born, was going to happen. Because God said it was going to happen. And He was going to come from the tribe of Judah. He was going to be the wonderful counselor, the Prince of Peace, the mighty God, the everlasting Father. The greatness of His government and the peace that He would bring, there would be no end. Now, anybody thinking about that one a little bit? Jesus made some statements when He was here, and statements that kind of shook the Jewish people. Statements such as, do not think I came to bring peace, but a sword. Father will be against son, mother will be against daughter, brother will be against brother. All because of belief in me. And you can look back within those times and you can see that those things were happening, those things were true, those things were real, and you can even see it today. Those who will follow Christ and those who won't, and sometimes even from the same family, dividing the family in two because of a belief in Jesus Christ. We still see that. Is that the peace that this is talking about? Is that the ultimate plan? Jesus brings peace. When the angels announced peace on earth, goodwill toward men, Jesus brought peace because He made it between mankind and the Father. He took the penalty of sin away. He died on a cross. He did it for you. He did it for me. He did it for all those who would love His appearing. And so there is a peace that Jesus established. There's also a peace between those who are Jew and Gentile, so to speak. Those who were of the nation of Israel and those who were not. Ephesians talks in depth about that He broke down the barrier, the wall dividing them, which was the law, and made them one new man. Thus, what? Establishing peace. Jesus brought that peace. But ultimately, when you think of peace and you're reading back here and you see this description of this Prince of Peace, the greatness of His government and peace, there will be no end. Well, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. God is not done. If we think that was it, we're missing something. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. There's a lot in this chapter, and I know I mentioned a little bit earlier because the main thrust of the chapter is about resurrection. But there's, within the middle of this discussion about there being a resurrection, and he's trying to get across to these early Christians, those who were Gentile Christians, predominantly living in Corinth. There's some of them that don't believe that there's a resurrection. And he's saying if there's no resurrection, then we're, of all men, most to be pitied. We have no hope. What are we doing living this life if there's no resurrection? We're hoping in nothing. And so he says there is a resurrection. As much as Jesus was raised, we will be raised. And that's the whole thrust of the passage. But in verse 20, he says, "But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the firstfruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead comes also through a man. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. But each in turn, Christ the firstfruits, then when he comes, those who belong to him. Then the end will come, when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father, and after he has destroyed all dominion, authority, and power. For he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death, for he has put everything under his feet. Now when it says that everything has been put under him, it is clear that this does not include God himself, who put everything under Christ. When he has done this, then the Son himself will be made subject to him who put everything under him, so that God may be all in all." Those things have not happened. Not yet. Jesus is reigning. Yes, Jesus is King. Jesus is mighty God. Jesus is Prince of Peace. He is the Counselor. But the end has not come. So there are promises out there. And God says, you want a sign? You want to know for sure that Jesus is coming again? How do you know that? Two unchangeable things, even as Abraham knew. Even as Ahaz knew, when God gave him a sign that there was a Messiah still coming, a virgin would give birth to a son, and you would call him God with us, Emmanuel, God with us. Ahaz knew Judah will last. How do you know Jesus is coming again? How do you know that we are going to receive a heavenly home, a spiritual home that will never end? By the same two unchangeable things. The praise team wants to come on up, you can. God made a promise, and He cannot lie. For to us today a child is born. To you today a child is born. And there's a lot more to this. We could go a lot deeper, but the idea is that when God first made those promises, He was talking about saving mankind, and He'd already made the plan before the foundations of the world, according to Ephesians chapter 1. And so when we see, looking back now at Jesus, that He came to this earth, and He came for a purpose, that there was always a plan. And so that plan is working for us. It's working for us to understand that the promises that we have not yet received, we're going to. It may be that you need to respond to that today. That you are at a point in life to say, I believe in God. I believe that He sent Jesus. I'm willing to give my life so that He will give me life.